And now it's time for Lefties Losing It. Let's check in with Gwen Walz, the wife of Kamala Harris's VP pick, Tim Walz. She seems nice and not at all deranged.
You just show me this. Turn the page, right? Turn the page. And you know what else that looks like? Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Donald Trump. We are turning the page. 52 days and we are turning the page. 52 days and it is bye-bye, Donald Trump.
Okay, I would have thought turning the page would involve getting rid of the current lot in power, and that's the Democrats last I checked. But anyway, talking about Democrats, she's back. Hillary is back with a wackadoodle MSNBC host, Rachel Maddow, and Hillary reckons that the media is too soft on Donald Trump. And note, this interview is after the second assassination attempt on Trump's life, inspired by the Dems labelling him a threat to democracy. So why don't we do that some more?
And I don't understand why it's so difficult for the press to have a consistent narrative about how dangerous Trump is. The late, great journalist Harry Evans one time said that, journalists should, really try to achieve objectivity. And by that, he said, I mean, they should cover the object. Well, the object in this case is Donald Trump, his demagoguery, his danger to our country and the world, and stick with it.
Stick with it? Until when? They successfully have him assassinated. And of course, Maddow did not call out Hillary's ugly, inflammatory rhetoric. She just encouraged it.
He's still being taught, especially by the media, that the more offensive he is, the more he can dominate the media space entirely. And I feel like you've been a good diagnoser of that.
Now to a lefty who claims the assassination attempts against Donald Trump are no big deal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't hearing pew-pew fire in the red state of Florida as common as hearing birds sing? I'm sure it wasn't personal. Please don't flatter yourself.
Charming, charming. And here we have a man who claims he was misgendered at the pharmacy, apparently calling him sir, damages masculinity. See if you can understand what this is about.
So I got served today at the pharmacy, and I'm not saying men can't look like this, because please go off, kings, but I'm not doing damage to masculinity. I think y'all are when you serve me, when you call me a man, right? I'm not a man. Don't consider me for the pool of men.
Done, dude, whatever you want. And here is Kamala Harris's stepdaughter, who is a far-left activist and a model. She is a professional model. She posted this to Instagram last week. It's a collaboration with fashion brand Tory Burch. They produce hideously ugly shoes, among other things.
Oh my God, are you Ella Imha?
Yeah.
What song are you listening to right now?
Well, I'm wearing a Tory Burch top, a Tory Burch skirt, Tory Burch heeled loafers, and obviously the Tory Burch Kira bag. Thanks, have a good one.
Wait, what?
We are learning more about the second Trump assassination attempt and the accused gunman, Ryan Wesley Routh, and what inspired the 58-year-old to target Trump. The suspect has a history of posting anti-Trump rhetoric, much of it mirroring Democrat talking points. The New York Post reports Routh has repeatedly railed against Trump on social media and posted about his alleged threats to democracy. And yes, that echoes precisely what we hear from Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris and President Joe Biden. The suspect wrote, "Democracy is on the ballot and we cannot lose." Sound familiar? Word for word what we hear from Democrat leadership. He also posted, "We cannot afford to fail. The world is counting on us to show the way." And after the July assassination attempt at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania, he posted this to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He wrote, "You should visit the victims in the hospital of the Trump rally victims and attend the funeral of the firemen that died. Trump certainly never would show the world what real leaders do." Let's cross now to Florida to speak to Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and senior counsel for the Article 3 project, Josh Hammer. Josh, what more can you tell us about the suspect and how he managed to come so close to President Trump with an AK-47 style rifle?
Rita, unfortunately, I do not have any good answers to the second question. I mean, what I can say, which I can conclude pretty close to West Palm Beach. I live about an hour from there, and I'm sure that you can conclude as well, living halfway around the world. The Secret Service clearly has not learned any of the relevant lessons whatsoever from the near miss, the near assassination of Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania in July 13. Now, I saw some people saying that Donald Trump playing a round of golf at Trump International, West Palm Beach, was an off-the-record, off-the-books trip. I'm sorry, that is ludicrous. It doesn't matter whether it was on the record or off the record. Donald Trump spends the vast majority of his time in Palm Beach, Florida. And when he's not at Mar-a-Lago, he's probably and usually golfing at that very golf club. It's 10 minutes from Mar-a-Lago. It's his home club. It is inexcusable for this to have possibly happened there. As far as the nature of the suspect himself, I think the social media track record, unfortunately, speaks for itself. This was actually a pretty known guy. The New York Times and Semaphore, two very well-known outlets in the U.S., both interviewed him. In fact, last year, he was on Fed's radar because he was traveling to Ukraine, trying to recruit Afghans fleeing the Taliban, trying to launder them through Iran to get to Ukraine to fight the Russians. He was extraordinarily zealous, unusually so, you might say, for the Ukrainian cause. But he was on the radar of law enforcement because he has two prior federal convictions as well, including for one gun charge back in 2002 in North Carolina when he was illegally owning a fully automatic weapon in violation of a Prohibition-era statute from the 1930s. To say this is inexcusable, Rita, I think would be an understatement. It's disgusting. I'm appalled. Thank God Donald Trump is safe.
And almost miraculous again. He's been very lucky twice, this time around just because a Secret Service agent spotted the rifle. And you would think that would be a very eagle-eyed individual indeed in a golf course to spot that rifle and to take immediate action. Josh, last night I detailed some of the frankly reprehensible media coverage seeking to essentially blame Trump for the attempts on his life. That has continued. Have a look at this from The Atlantic, saying no other president has used an assassination attempt to inflame American politics the way Donald Trump does. Tom Nichols really does find new ways to humiliate himself. And here is Politico's headline focusing on Republicans being outraged by an assassination attempt and blaming them for partisan finger-pointing. Well, there's only one side having its candidate targeted by political operatives in the justice system, not to mention the two assassination attempts in as many months.
The rhetoric from the left in this country is absolutely disgusting. Tom Nichols right there, who we were just seeing his writing in The Atlantic, I mean, he is the poster child of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. But unfortunately, there are many, many people on both the left and the controlled opposition faux right that are speaking right now very similar language. So you had Jasmine Crockett, who was a nothing backbencher U.S. Congresswoman from the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. She was on MSNBC on Sunday saying that, to this day, MAGA Republicans, MAGA extremists pose a unique threat to democracy. Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader of the U.S. House, he had a tweet 2 hours after the near assassination again of Donald Trump saying that MAGA Republicans are the extreme unprecedented threat. Project 2025, national abortion ban, all this stuff, which, by the way, not even true. Donald Trump has explicitly disavowed both of those things. And then Hakeem Jeffries actually doubled down in another post on X on Monday morning. So these people have no shame whatsoever. But to your other point, it has not escaped many of us that the political violence and the attempts to assassinate political rivals it really is disproportionately, overwhelmingly, I would say nearly exclusively coming from the political left against the right. Floyd Lee Corkins back in 2012, who was a left-wing nutjob who was ginned up by MSNBC, tried to assassinate people at the Family Research Council, social conservative Christians in Washington, D.C. 5 years later, James Hodgkinson tried to assassinate half of the Republican congressional baseball team, almost fatally wounding Steve Scalise in the process. In 2022, Nicholas Roski flew from California to Maryland trying to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh after the Dobbs abortion leak opinion. Thank God he was arrested at the very last minute there. Audrey Hale, the transgender individual who shot up the Covenant School, the Christian school in Nashville, the memo, the manifesto was suppressed. I could go on here. And now these two assassination attempts against Trump. But when will there be any accountability for what the left is doing in this country to get people not just to yell at their TVs, but to actually pick up arms and to try to assassinate their rivals? It is disgusting stuff.
You are so right. There's been a remarkable lack of accountability for these Democrats who are spouting the most reckless, inflammatory rhetoric. If there were two attempts against Kamala Harris's life in as many months, every single Republican, even every single media identity who had been heavily critical of her would be under scrutiny. Their rhetoric would be questioned. This just isn't happening with Trump. And the fact that the suspect's hysterical tweets about Trump mirror what we are seeing from Kamala Harris and many others also in the media, in politics, in some cases, some of it is word for word. And I've got to ask you, Josh, is another attempt against Donald Trump's life a matter of when, not if? How long can Trump play golf, have outdoor rallies? He's been remarkably lucky twice, but as his son Eric remarked, my father is running out of lives here. How many more rifles are going to come within assassination distance of my father? That's what he said, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same thing.
I was getting dinner last night with some friends here in Florida, and the topic of the 2024 election naturally came up, as it often does these days here in the U.S. And one of my friends said that she thought that Kamala was going to win. And I said that, no, I actually respectfully disagree. I'm not confident in this, but I think that if the election were held tomorrow, I think that Donald Trump would win, which is my actual stance. And then my friend responded and she said, that's assuming that he's alive. I mean, that's assuming that he is actually on the ballot come November 5th and that they have not taken him out. Look, Rita, I have not personally on the shows that I host or on social media gone ahead and blamed the Secret Service, FBI, deep state, individual actors of sabotage and trying to put Donald Trump in that position. But I've had many friends who have done that over the past 24 to 48 hours. And I have to say, I do not blame them, because this is really starting to look like a bit more than a pure coincidence, isn't it? I mean, if the Secret Service is really bogged down by DEI hires, which I happen to believe that it is, you would think that there would be more high-profile screw-ups on other people other than Donald J. Trump. I mean, there's other data points there. If the problem is systemic to the Secret Service, he would not be the only victim of this gross negligence. How many episodes of gross negligence do we have to see in order to conclude that there actually is something perhaps a little bit more perfidious and sinister going on here?
On that first assassination attempt, we have now more explosive revelations about the Secret Service. The New York Post is reporting the agent in charge of the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, was known to be incompetent and failed a key examination during their federal law enforcement training. This is according to new whistleblower allegations released by Senator Josh Hawley. How can the Secret Service be that incompetent? We've also learned this week their intelligence units were absent from the Butler rally, and even after the shooting, they made enormous errors in not properly securing the hospital where President Trump was receiving treatment. You can understand why people are believing conspiracy theories. It's hard sometimes to believe you could have this level of incompetence.
Yeah, it really is. And sometimes, as we've often learned in America in the past 5-10 years, the line between a conspiracy theory and fact sometimes is actually quite blurry. I mean, the left obviously has dismissed any number of things as conspiracy theories, whether it's the lab leak in Wuhan, China, or the Hunter Biden Russian laptop as Russian disinformation, which obviously it was not. So the line does get a little blurry sometimes there. But, generally speaking, when it comes to the Secret Service, I mean, one of my first thoughts when I first heard the news on Sunday was, I think a lot about America's enemies in the world, about China, Russia, Iran. I mean, what a clown show we must look like to our enemies all around the world at a time when our enemies have never been more on the march over the past 25, 30 years. They must look at us and they must just laugh and laugh and laugh. And another thing that I was thinking about, the news cycle here in the U.S. is so chaotic, and we're 6-7 weeks or whatever it is away from a presidential election. So the news cycle moving this quickly is somewhat understandable. But we also moved on from that first assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, very, very, very quickly. And we still have this congressional task force. We're waiting for them to produce any findings. But every time that there is a near assassination, an assassination attempt on a high-profile individual, let alone a president of the United States, every time that happens, and the news cycle just moves on within a few days as if nothing happened and no one's even talking about it. Every day that happens, every instance, God forbid that happens, if it happens again, God forbid, America just gets closer and closer to being a full-fledged banana republic, I feel.
You're absolutely right. The way they tried to memory hole that assassination attempt, and it was so remarkable in so many ways. The fact that at that last millisecond he turned his head, saving his life, and still it came within a couple of centimetres of killing him. And so to have it all captured on video, and then to see the media just move on like it was nothing when they're obsessing about January 6th to this day, it just tells you everything you need to know about why trust in the media is at historic lows, Josh. And the US media, I think, again this week have really disgraced themselves with the way they're covering this second attempt, almost blaming Trump and his supporters for being upset about it.
I don't see a whole lot of sadness, frankly. I don't see a whole lot of regret. I don't see a whole lot of contemplation or introspection or any kind of just looking in the mirror and asking whether or not, any of these individuals, whether it's Joy Reid and Jen Psaki on MSNBC or Joy Behar on The View or any of these other individuals, I don't see a whole lot of people asking, am I partially, like in a small way, am I partially to blame for this current noxious atmosphere in American politics? I mean, surely it is not asking too much to ask at a bare minimum that we not call for the extermination, either literally or proverbially, of the opposing candidate. I was watching a clip earlier today of Congressman Dan Goldman, who is in New York City, very left-wing Democrat. He actually called verbatim for the elimination of Donald Trump earlier this year. He was talking about this, this Democratic Party propaganda context that Donald Trump is this unmitigated threat to democracy, and he actually said he has to be eliminated. Well, what in the world did you guys think was going to happen? Ultimately, we are culpable for our own actions. I'm not saying that anyone actually pulled the trigger other than Thomas Crooks in Butler, Pennsylvania, but you also cannot overlook the actual broader context. Those two things happen to be both true at the same time, I feel.
And we're seeing them trying to hold Republicans responsible for these supposed bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, but you can't hold Democrats responsible for characterizing Trump as a Hitler, as a threat to democracy, and then having these acts of violence perpetrated against him. It's bizarre. It's sadly what we've become used to in 2024. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.